Hello there, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Football Manager Therapy. I am your host, Rich Owens, and joining me this morning, we have my two lovely friends who I can definitely tell apart. We've got D-Boy Plays, and we have Steak Bake. Fellas, D, let's start with you so I can definitely see whose lips move first. How are you doing this morning, pal?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Rich. How are you?
Oh, they're tricking me.
I'm doing very well. It's been a lovely week of strim and some gigs, and yeah, it's been a good week. Good week overall.
Good. Living the dream. Literally living
a dream.
Living a dream. Is it your? Well, it's not say if it's yours or not. You're living it. It's lean into it. That's my advice.
I like it.
So I'm full of great advice. You'll get used to this over the next over the coming episodes. Sage is a word people would use to describe me quite frequently. Stakey, how are you this morning, buddy?
Yeah, I'm excellent, thank you, mate. Just a little bit tired from getting out of bed at silly o'clock in the morning for certain personal reasons, but I am here now and happy and ready to go, raring to go. What about yourself, Rich?
What about, I'm not bad, thank you, mate. Not bad. Can't complain. From a personal point of view, I'm coming to the end of my my 6-week summer holiday because I work in one of them schools, and I am so ready to go back. So ready to go back to work. The concept of just looking after other people's children for a limited time scale really appeals to me at the moment, rather than my own constantly. So it's
because there's a full stop to it. That's why. It's because at 3 o'clock,
100% there is. Yeah, exactly. Everyone's counting down the seconds. It's like the old episode of The Simpsons where the bell rings at 3 o'clock and everyone just goes hooray, and then off they scarper, and then I just sit with my head in my hands for like 2 minutes, just and then go back home to mine and just phone it in until bedtime. There you go. That's parenting in a nutshell. There you go. There you go. That's the new subplot of this podcast. Is parenting advice, really bad parenting advice. Get on Patreon. There's probably more of it on. There's not. There's no parenting advice on Patreon. What there is on Patreon and on YouTube and Spotify and all the other places you can listen to this podcast is good Football Manager advice. That's what we do around here. And boy, howdy, have we got some for you today? My goodness gracious me! Because today we've done a bit of homework, we've done a bit of thinking behind the scenes before recording. I was watching my good friend D streaming the other day, and on D stream we got talking about transfer deadline day. It popped up on the stream, and I thought, oh, that sounds like a really, really interesting basis for a slightly longer form discussion about transfer deadline day, both in the context of Football Manager and in real life as well. And I thought, if only there was a platform, that we all shared that we could have these kind of discussions on. And then I got sad because there wasn't one. So good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Lads, transfer deadline day. Look, it's something we all, it exists. But in the wider context of Football Manager, it's not necessarily something that people get that into. And what we want to work out today is, first of all, how much we kind of take advantage or we use transfer deadline day, because it is something you can get the option of just, you can opt out early doors transfer deadline day. And is it something in terms of Football Manager to start with that you both enjoy? I mean, Steak, before we got going, you were like, I've been thinking, I've made some notes. Steakety bakety, are you a transfer deadline day aficionado when it comes to FM?
I think I click the big old button that says skip almost every single time on transfer deadline day. Mostly because I feel like you can just do it all in the time anyway. It gives you some nice graphics on the screen, a little bit of a countdown clock. And that's really it to a normal day of Football Manager. I suppose it ticks through the day every 15 minutes and you get more interview questions, which are annoying, and just ask you, are you going to buy a left back? Are you going to buy a left back? And I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything today. Only if someone comes in and bids. But even if I had transfer plans, I just kind of get them done during the day anyway. I feel like the whole day itself on Football Manager in particular is kind of lacking that urgency. and that excitement that you get from it in real life. I don't know about you guys, but I am someone that has Sky Sports on if it's a Saturday or a day of the week that I've got free. Sky Sports is on, BBC Sports on my phone, checking every single rumour. Fabrizio Romano's Twitter, here we land guy is out. I want to know who's going where. I don't care what level of the game I'm watching, just some kind of transfer news. I want to know where all the players that I've played with on Football Manager are going to end up in this transfer window. And I absolutely love transfer deadline day. It's great. And then on Football Manager, I go, I just done doing my transfers as normal. It's not really that significant, unfortunately. I think there's quite a lot they can do with it.
I think that's fair. I'm very much like you. The real transfer deadline day, well, slightly less so recently, but it's definitely in the past. Very like yourself, big advocate. It's on multiple screens. It's everywhere. I'm hooked onto Twitter or any other, whatever other, social media site you're using. Twitter's great. Obviously, the Sky Sports transfer news, that's also live updated. They're both very, very good. And I love me the concept of a transfer deadline day. But as I say, in terms of Football Manager, I'd say I'm probably in the same camp as you, Steaky. I do find it to be a little bit lacking, and I think we'll kind of get into that a little bit deeper as the conversation goes on. Let's just finalize our foundations. Dee, your thought in terms of a Football Manager transfer deadline day? Are you a take part it, or are you we'll just gloss over this?
I tend to take part, but purely not for because it's great in the game and I love how it is. Everything goes that ugly deadline day yellow, first of all. And when I say everything, if you go into a game, everything's still that weird. I think the Dulux swatch name should be deadline day yellow. and it's just like the match goes that way, like every button goes that, and I really despise that because it doesn't seem to sort of it can't work out the difference between two things. I take part, but I don't take part. I sort of just sit and hit continue slightly. It takes slightly longer for me to get to the end of the day. Maybe I should start declining to take part in them because I don't really get involved, and it doesn't really jazz me up. And the other thing with it as well, I guess, in terms of taking part, is that lower league, which a lot of On The Med was, when you're in lower leagues, they're not part of a deadline day. They don't get it. You have deadline day, but you'll hit continue once and it will go, oh, deadline day's passed. You missed it. So that's why I've always been okay, I'm taking part just in case I need to do any movement. But yeah, it's real life again. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I would, if I had facility to, I'd have Sky Sports on, watching the thing throughout the day. We were joking about it. I think when you checked in, Rich, talking about what it's like on TalkSport, we hear, there's some fantastic movement going on in the lower leagues. And, and all Forest Green Rovers have made a bid for Oldham Athletics left back. What do you think of it, Simon? And that would be really exciting. But in game, it doesn't have the same grab, I guess. How they get it, though, is going to be, well, I guess that's what we're here to talk about.
We're going to fix it. Don't worry. We're going to fix everything today. We're going to fix everything. Yeah. Don't worry. FM25, if you like transfer deadline day, everybody, you're welcome. We're here to resolve the issues. I think for me, it's in terms of a transfer deadline day. Again, I'm normally more of an opt-out kind of guy. It's very rare that I'll on FM especially, it's very rare that I'll kind of go through every 15-minute increment of the day. Recently, I think that's more to do with the kind of save that I'm doing. And we've talked about this a little bit in bits and pieces over the last few weeks in terms of how varying styles of content will affect different ways that you play the game. Especially with my save this year, because I'm not staying at clubs for a particularly large amount of time. My transfer policy is very different to that it would be if I was doing, for example, a one club save. So if I was at your Santa Clara, I think I probably would put more effort into a transfer deadline day or a transfer window in general, because it's a lot more long-term planning. Whereas with What's the Story, I'm looking at a club and I'm like, right, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is what I need to do. What do I need in order to do it? I need 2 strikers and a left back. Okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to buy 2 strikers and a left back. And then if that doesn't work, we'll see what we need again next year. We'll keep going like that. I'm not looking and thinking, right, okay, we talked about youth development last time around. It's like, okay, well, let's make sure that the youth academy is stocked. Let's make sure we've got a really strong under 21s. Let's make sure that's less of a priority. And because that's less of a priority, generally speaking, I'm spending less time looking at transfers. So I don't think there's been a transfer window over the course of season 10 or 11 into my save so far this year. I don't think there's been a transfer window where I've needed to still be doing business on transfer deadline day. And I think that especially plays into it for me in terms of recent Football Manager and transfer deadline days, because there just hasn't been the necessity for me to go in and break it down into 15-minute increments and do it that way, because I've got no business left to do. I think it's one of the things that people have talked about with previous FMs, and it's something that I myself experienced, especially with FM23. Even with the transfer deadline day, I used to find it really difficult to move players out of the club, especially managing bigger clubs. The network save was a prime example of that. Moving to Manchester United, right, here are 6 players that are all not really very good, but they're all on 350 grand a week. I don't want them in the club anymore. I found it really, really difficult to move them on. And then FM24 comes around. Obviously, we ported this network save over to FM24. Suddenly, transfers became significantly more straightforward. It's like, right, I've got a 33-year-old central defensive midfielder who's not really very good. His legs have gone. He's on 350 grand a week. I can't sell him. Oh, suddenly the Saudi League's been put in the game, and Al Hilal are offering £40 million for him. Fantastic. This is the best day of my life. Suddenly, these issues are solved very, very quickly. Like, wonderful. I'm very, very happy with this as a set of circumstances. So especially since that's come around as well, it's not like I'm sat there with big name players that I just can't get rid of and I need to do a transfer deadline day for. So for me, the necessity to do it isn't there as much. Whereas if I'm doing a 1 club save, I think, it's one of the things that I do like about transfer deadline day is that, and you do get the messages from agents. It's like, oh, there's a centre back here who's playing over in the Bundesliga. He's not getting much game time, and you could get him for £6.5 million. You go, well, actually, I hadn't even considered that centre back. My scouts haven't told me about him, but suddenly that's not. So I think there are useful little bits and pieces to them, but it's not. It doesn't feel like it's essential. Like there was a time where transfer deadline day, you have to be, you need to be by your computer, you need to be by your phone, you need to be able to check up on these things because something exciting is going to happen. If you skip transfer deadline day, it doesn't necessarily feel most of the time like you're missing out on something big. And that's something that I think would be, if it felt more essential, that's something that would, massively encourage me to click on take part every single time, regardless of whether I had any business left to conduct. I think that's something that for me would make it make it another feature of Football Manager that you have to use, or if you don't use, you're going to feel like you're missing out on. I think that's fair to say.
Yes, definitely. I think if you added a number of features to make it different to a normal day, which I think is really important, and it's not necessarily things that I would describe as completely different. I just think more things happening is one of the major parts of what I want to happen on deadline day. I want there to be more offers coming in. If a player says wanted next to their name and the team doesn't come in for them at all during the window, they should come in on deadline day. Even if it's a rubbish offer, if they're interested, they're going to test the waters. Even if it's an inquiry, I'd love to see the inquiry feature used a little bit more, where, you're a mid-table Premier League club and suddenly Luton are like, oh, well, could you have him on loan for the season? Are you going to play him? Are you doing something with him? A little bit more of that, just a bit more information. And then you start to question yourself, don't you? You start to be like, oh, you know what? Actually, no, he's not going to get game time. And I hadn't loan listed him. So I think I'll let him go to you for the season if you're going to pay his wages, that kind of thing. I just think there needs to be more. And I've written down a couple of things, which I'm sure we'll go over the course of the podcast, of things that they could add. But mostly it's just more of what's already there.
Yeah. You can obviously, I think deadline day is helpful for utilizing things like asking about market interest, much in the same way that you get that just that endless reel of agent offers going, oh, here's someone who's just testing the waters for a move. That's when you can also do the same sort of thing. But yeah, outside of that, there's not enough, like, dare I say, there's not enough tension within the day, within the game that makes you go, oh, I actually need to pay attention here because, you know, such and such player might be leaving me and I need to find a replacement. So I've got to deal with this. And, you know, it doesn't really, doesn't get you amped.
No. And I think that it has the potential to. It definitely has the potential to. I mean, in terms of my save at the moment, I've just gone through my first proper transfer window with Porto, and you know, that bearing in mind the objective of my save is to, you know, I want to beat Benfica and everything really, really badly because they've upset me and they deserve it. But
Absolutely.
I'm looking at their. Thank you very much, both. That's what we're all here for. Just to, you know, that validation is important to me, especially when I beat Benfica at everything. The big idiots. I look at their transfer window, and you know, you get you skip transfer deadline day, and then you get the transfer summary at the end. And even though they were, you have a little look. It's like, what have they actually done? But there was nothing that was coming up as a precursor to transfer deadline day that was making me worry, because sometimes you'll see it, and if you're in, you know, if you've got a major rival in a league, like if you're managing in Scotland and you're managing Rangers, Celtic are linked to a 36-year-old, you know, Romelu Lukaku. You're like, oh, that could cause problems for me. Maybe I'm going to just need to assess the state of my squad because, you know, despite Romelu Lukaku not being as good as Victor Osimhen, he's still comparatively competent on Football Manager. And, and no further questions. And so you might look at your team and think, okay, well, do we have somebody who has the capacity to score the same amount of goals as a 36-year-old Romelu Lukaku? And then you realize that, you know, at that point, you're probably 7 or 8 seasons into the game and you've signed 17 Argentinian one-kid strikers, and you go, probably, we do. Yeah. But there might be circumstances where a team is looking to strengthen in certain areas and you think, actually, maybe we need to up our level. Maybe we need to try and match that in some capacity. But again, transfer deadline day, that's something that, for example, Steak, you've written bits and pieces down in terms of things that you think would make it a more interesting experience. That's one of the things that I would like to see, for example. So you are managing a club, and some notes from your backroom staff, from your assistants, say, just so you know, our league rivals have just signed X player, or they have just signed these 2 players. In terms of, you know, when you look at league rankings, you look at things like your squad planner, and you look at, you know, in terms of the competence of your squad overall, so suddenly they have a very, very dominant midfield. Are we going to be able to keep pace with them? Is this something you want us to address over the next few? That would be a really cool feature, you know, actually direct comparison to rival clubs, or clubs that not necessarily rivals, clubs that you think you are going to be, you know, fighting out for a Europa League place with, or, you know, you've just been promoted to the Premier League. It's like, oh, well, you know, Blackburn and West Brom have just come up with you and they've signed these players. They're quite good. Do you think we need to be matching that quality of player? Do you want us to go out and see who? That would be really, really cool. Like a little bit more reactive, I suppose, to your overall transfer window. That would be a really, really cool feature. And would it be that hard to implement? I don't know, because I don't work for SI. But it seems to me like the depth they've gone into other areas of analysis and scouting and everything else, especially with FM24, that seems like the next logical step in terms of, you know, what you could be getting your backroom staff to do for you.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd absolutely like to see it. If that's something that you've written down, by the way, Stakey, I'm really, really sorry, because that just came to me in a vision. Beautiful. Imagine that in years to come.
It's not actually, but it's a fantastic idea, and I completely agree that is an area of the game that you could definitely. And it's just a couple of messages on the deadline day, isn't it? It's just, it doesn't have to be like a huge thing. Just a few messages that say, by the way, your rivals have strengthened quite heavily on deadline day. Do you think we need to compete? And yeah, that's quite nice. I like that.
Just little drip fed things of like, okay, yeah, like you said, newly promoted teams. This is the sort of player they've signed. We've like, here are, you know, well, on scouting, you have find similar players. They could arguably, there could be a thing that goes, oh, such and such player has joined. Yeah, like you say, Sheffield Wednesday, they've just got promoted. There we go. We're to and fro with our team. And Portsmouth as well. been promoted. We're all back in the Prem. We're all back in the Prem. Imagine what a scenario. And they've signed this player. Here are 3 players that are of a similar ilk, cost around the same sort of price. If we think we need to do the same sort of improvement, you can go, okay, that's interesting to see those guys. They could be worth a scout. And then, and then you realize, I didn't need them. I can do it myself. But it's good to know. It's good to have a little insight.
It's really nice to have there as a contingency, isn't it? It's just in case. And as we've talked about before, it depends on how much time you sink into a transfer window in general. Most of us spend quite a long time on them in terms of Football Manager because of who we are as people. It's rare that it's an element of the game that it's rare that people will gloss over. And it's like I said earlier, if I'm getting to the end, if I'm getting to a transfer deadline day and I've still got business to do, have I done my due diligence over the course of the rest of the window? Should I be leaving things to the very last minute? Of course, there are going to be variances. There are going to be things that crop up, like all of a sudden, one of the Saudi teams has come in and offered you, £60 million for your midfielder that you never thought you were going to sell because he's only worth 20, and he's the linchpin of your team, and suddenly Al Ettifaq, we want to give you £60 million for him. I like £60 million. That seems like a good number of £1 million. So I'm going to say yes. And then he's like, okay, this is fine. And then the panic sets and scramble. We need a new starting midfielder. And that, these things happen. But generally speaking, the planning has happened and most of the business is done comparatively early doors. Again, if it goes down to transfer deadline day, it's a rarity for me, for example, as a player. But it would be nice if those features were in there, just to, it would feel more cohesive as a day, as an experience. That would feel so much nicer. And again, I feel like on transfer deadline day, there is a little bit more realism in terms of the players that is offering you, for example. Like I say, those contrast and compare, that'd be a wonderful feature, because it's something that in terms of scouting, I don't necessarily take as much advantage of as I should, but it'd be really, really nice. I feel like it's a little bit more realistic in terms of transfer deadline day. I mean, for example, I've got my Porto save loaded up at the moment as a basis of comparison for a few bits and pieces. I've had an email come in. I've had my scout report come in. It's like, right, here's our scouting recommendations. The highest rated players, shockingly enough, on my scouting recommendation, bearing in mind I'm managing a club who've got a budget now of around £7 or £8 million. Every single player it's trying to get me to buy is worth, 100 million plus. I don't have £100 million, weirdly enough. So this feels like a bit of a wasted opportunity from my scouts. What are they doing? Whereas on transfer deadline day, I mean, again, they're like, hey, this lad's available for 4. You might be able to talk him down to 2. Suddenly, that's a conversation that's maybe worth having. But who knows? Stakey, what's on your list? Give me something from your wonderful list of ideas that you would like to see potentially implemented to, increase the excitement and necessity of a Football Manager transfer deadline day.
So after discussing kind of reactive transfers that seem to be happening and what you do in that situation, I figured there needs to be a little bit more on the player desperation side. Because not only do you want to sell players and do people want your players, sometimes players want to leave. And the transfer deadline day happens a month into the season. Players tend to get a pretty good idea of whether they've been in the squad so far. They know whether they're going to be playing. They can get worried about their playing time and things like that. I think if you take part in deadline day, players' desperation should increase much faster. They should want to leave quicker. They should want to leave on loan when they previously didn't really want to. In particular, that's one that I see quite a lot in my Portsmouth save. They think they're ready for my first team as, top of the Premier League, kind of Champions League level Portsmouth. And I'm like, well, you're not really ready. Will you go out on loan to a lower Premier League club? No, I'm not interested. I don't want to go out on loan. You're like, well, you're not going to play. And I don't care. I don't care if I'm not going to play. When it gets to deadline day, you might actually care all of a sudden. And suddenly, previously, you didn't want to join Luton or Crystal Palace or, even teams down in the Championship. When suddenly they seem a little bit more appealing, certainly when you've got that loan farm and you yourself are trying to offer out players very quickly and send them around the globe on loan, a lot of them will reject wherever they've been offered from. And you get that kind of doesn't have sufficient interest in joining to make an offer from the club. I feel like if you had that desperation from the player, and you could kind of tell it using morale or using messages of them being like, why haven't you offered me out? what's going on. And I use the example of Ivan Toney, for example. I imagine he probably won't have wanted to end up in the Saudi league desperately as his first priority in this transfer window. But as the transfer window goes along, Arsenal have decided they don't want him. Chelsea's bid wasn't good enough. Suddenly there's like 7 hours left, and your other option is that you're a Brentford player for the rest of the season. And he's made that very clear that he doesn't want to be. So he's gone, you know what, I'll take the 300k a week, to be honest, because why the heck not? So, and then he's kind of forced that move through. I imagine it wasn't too much biting your hand off when it's that amount of money, because it was pretty good money. But in other situations, players will ask to leave for smaller amounts of money. And I think there should be a little bit more of that. Maybe the message that comes up about, I need to talk about my asking price. It's a little bit too high. Nobody's bidding on me. Just a little bit more of that anxiousness from a player. And then you become more reactive because you were like, you know what, actually, you're probably going to stay. And throughout the whole window, you've been pretty fine about it. But now you've suddenly decided that it's a scary day and you want to leave. So then you want them to react. And then you get that, oh, now I need to buy a new striker. And now I need to buy a new midfielder kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Yeah. I, that could really tie into players' personality types as well. You know, I think that's something that, again, could be lent into in terms of, you know, making the players feel more like real players, especially when you get, you know, X amount of seasons in and a lot of the real life players have retired and moved on. And it's, you know, it's new gens and your newer players, make them feel like more like real human beings rather than just a list of numbers. Because you know, it's those personality types thing that could really, really heavily lean into things as well. I think Ivan Toney's a really, really good example. You know, it's obviously the dream Premier League moves haven't really kind of, you know, come through for him. And as you say, you know, 300 odd grand a week as a consolation prize isn't terrible. You know, he's not playing a particularly great standard of football, but you know, he's getting really, really, really heavily paid for it. And for a player, and again, talk personality types, a player Ivan Toney style personality type, it's probably not gonna lose that much sleep over it, I suppose. In the long run, you know, it's probably a bit of a knock to the ego. You know, it's, oh, loads of Premier League clubs are going to be interested in me. Oh, they're not. Are they not? Have we tried? Look, Luton went down. Oh no. Okay. What about Wimbledon? Haven't existed for 20. Oh no. Okay, Saudi it is then. Oh, all right, fine. I'll go and take the money. That would be really, really nice to see. And I think it's the one thing from a personal point of view. I mean, you know, you talk about, you know, the realistic asking prices. That is absolutely a crutch that I lean on going the other way this year, especially in terms of my outgoing transfers. There have been multiple times where I've had players at clubs and, you know, a bid comes in from one of the bigger teams, like a PSG or a Man City trying to lowball you. It's like, oh, you've got a midfielder here who's worth £60 million. We're going to give you 35 and you're going to thank us for it. And you're like, no, I'm not going to take that money. That's ridiculous. He's got 4 years left on his contract and he's been at the club since he was 3. No, we're okay. And then immediately they come to you as like, boss, you've not sold me to them. And I'm really, really upset about it. Firstly, how dare you? And what we're going to do about it is like, well, let's set a realistic asking price. And then you ask, okay, what do you think a realistic asking price is? And then you click whichever number comes up, because it's normally 40 to 50 million pounds more than they're worth. And they're always happy with it. They are always delighted with that as a set of circumstances. Oh, fantastic. Well, if that bid comes in, then let's go. I had a couple of Ajax earlier in the season. I think one of my defensive midfielders that I was relying on quite heavily. An offer came in from a Saudi club for £30 million, and I rejected it because he was worth 45. And he said, "What do you think of realistic asking prices?" Then, and then I clicked on the little plus sign, and it came up with £98 million. And he went, "Yep, that sounds good to me." And he stayed because okay,
yeah.
£98 million. Okay. Are you sure? Okay. Yep. Fine. It's like, this man doesn't know how to haggle.
He doesn't know numbers. He doesn't know how to count.
Yeah. He's not aware. £98 million, and here's an abacus for homework reasons. But I rely very, very heavily on that to keep some of the bigger players at my clubs. So don't get me wrong. I think in terms of the wider spectrum of the game, you know, that kind of, you know, it going both ways on that spectrum, you know, you can offer them out high, but the more desperate they get, the lower they're willing to go. Absolutely bring that in. I just know that in the future, if that was a feature that kind of, turned up in the game, that's going to massively hamstring me, because I'll do anything to keep some of these lads at the clubs I've managed, especially the key ones. I will do absolutely anything. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm a desperate man, and desperate times, as it turns out, are everywhere. They quite frequent, like buses. So but I like that, though. I do like that as a core concept. I think that would work beautifully. What else have you got then, Stakety, as a man that made many, many notes?
To be fair, one of those notes was price accuracy and the level at which people come in at, to be fair. Not necessarily from how the player values themselves, but how the game values a player a little bit. I feel like that should be a little bit more dynamic. Like, you get an 18-year-old wonder kid who's come through your youth academy, he's homegrown club, and he's got a 5-year contract, and it says he's worth £263 million when you absolutely know that you'd take 50 for him. And every team would. There's very few youngsters, barring like Endrick and Neymar and that kind of level of player, go for ludicrous amounts of money when they're a teenager. And I think that needs to be an element that's kind of honed down a little bit. The price ranges, I feel, are a little bit off. And when it comes to deadline day, they should drop or increase if there's demand. If there's 14 clubs interested, you should see that number start to creep up as you offer them out. And then suddenly it's saying, oh, actually, there's 14 clubs interested. Maybe we should ramp this up a bit and see how much money we can actually get for them. And I think that's something that could be done quite easily. I think it just needs a little bit more honing in whatever algorithm they use to make those player values, and then make it a little bit more adaptive and happen during the countdown of the deadline day. So yeah, building on that point, that's I completely agree with you on that one. I don't know how you feel about that, Dan.
Well, I was about to say, I think Sports Interactive needs to hire the people who do Ticketmaster ticket per pricing. So as soon as there's demand, double that price, and make all the clubs queue to put their bids in, and eventually not be able to get a ticket to go and see a certain player, air quotes, from Manchester. I think that pricing does need assessing a little bit when you've got a player that, again, sort of thinking about what you've said with, like, players wanting to leave all of a sudden. That could also be reflected, because when you get those conversations, I had it when I was at Valencia on the Med. So many players, because I built a decent team, but then so many players would just be like, Arsenal have put a bid in, I want to go to Arsenal. And you're like, well, I don't want to let you go. All right, well, let's settle on a price. Again, there's got to be some sort of better dynamic understanding why that price has been set. And then on your player values, when you're trying to sign someone or trying to sell someone, being able to sort of go, okay, well, it's almost like get the bidding war sort of thing going, having a dynamic bidding war moment within the thing, almost like an auction for a player. Because that was one of my notes, is sort of more specifically with contracts. Because me and you were talking, Stakey, this week about, because you just started a retro save whilst I was doing mine, and you sent me a screenshot about a certain Croatian midfielder, Luka Modric, who I've grown to hate this game cycle. He screwed me over in the Euros playthrough that we did. He turned me down in the retro save. He's messed over Stakey. I don't know what he's about. I'm not happy with him. But you offer a player really good money and then he goes off to a team for less money. It'd be good if there was okay, this is how much that club have just offered him, or he comes back to you when when another bid's come through and they go, well, they've actually just offered me this. What can you offer me to make me join your team? And actually have it a little bit more in depth and a little bit more interactive with regards to actually securing a player's contract down. So that could be something that would be worth introducing, just to help justify why. I think, was it 80,000 you offered Luka Modric and he turned you down for 8K?
Yeah, it was something like that. Maybe 8, 9, 10K at Liverpool. Or,
doesn't make sense.
No, not at all. Money does talk, and it definitely needs to do so a little bit more in Football Manager. Obviously, sometimes you get when there's a club that they are more interested in, if you're that club, you get them come back to you and say, can you offer a bit more wages? Which I've seen maybe once every three seasons. It's so rare. I think only one player in my whole Portsmouth save has come to me and said, can I have a bit more money before the transfer has happened? So that's certainly something that needs addressing. It needs to come up more. It's going to be a real big issue. Player wages is a huge part of transferring a player, and I'd almost like there to be a bit more back and forth with the agent a little bit. It's something that I've written down as well, is kind of wage structure that you have at your club. I think it should be a little bit like the code of conduct. You kind of agree it with your board before the season starts. Star players are going to be in this range. Important players are going to be in this range. Breakthrough prospects are never going to be more than this price. And then you should be able to be like, well, you're coming in as my new central midfielder. My current central midfielder is just as good as you, and he is on this and on this. What do you think of that kind of thing with their agent? And if there was a bit more dynamism with that, and then the agent comes back and says, I think he's better. I think my guy's better than that, or at least he's going to be better than that. So maybe I want him to increase his wage after 50 games, because then he's going to be on more than the player you already have who's aging, and he might go down a hill a little bit. He's going to be better, so therefore I want better later on. And that little negotiation, because at the moment it's just one screen. You click through the contract, they offer you another contract, you go no, and then they accept. It's quite stationary, it's quite basic, all in one screen. I'd like a bit more back and forth with the agent a little bit. It might be frustrating if you're doing lots of transfers.
Yeah,
but you got to find that balance, and I think that's where the wages can kind of work. If you're interested in the wage structure and players coming to you like that,
and that then it leans perfectly into sometimes the drama of a transfer deadline day. It's quarter to 10, and you think you might have got this deal over the line, then the agent comes back at 10:30. Oh, actually, Brighton have offered him 20 grand a week more than you. Is that something you're because it's the kind of thing that I think behind the scenes these are the things when there's multiple clubs going in. Of course it's happening, and I know that in terms of transfer, in terms of a transfer value compared to a wage, I think that obviously a transfer value is significantly more public. We've talked about this on the pod before. There's no way to make a bid. You can't bid privately for players anymore. Look at my experiences with Jeb in the network game with players like Jude Bellingham and Victor Osimhen. It's like, suddenly Wolves offered £300 million for one of these players again. What are the chances? Thanks, Jeb.
Just jeopardize everything.
Thanks for he's jeopardized the situation. That's what he's done.
I like it. Yeah.
Thank you. It's now canon. So you can't bid privately, but you would imagine on the one hand, there is going to be a little bit more secrecy in terms of wage, but at the same time, when there's multiple clubs going in for players, and like you say, you'll always see on that screen, has more interest in, has equal interest, has less interest if it's a multiple club situation. It would be nice to hear more from the agents. As I say, you've had that experience once in 3 or 4 seasons, said Stakey. I've not, it's not something I've seen this year. I've not had an agent come back to me saying, oh, chuck a little bit more money our way and you could be in there. I've also been blighted by Luka Modric this year. So this is more of
what's his problem?
What is Luka's issue? And what is his problem? Look, just because he's small and really, really good at football, like aggressively good at football, doesn't mean he can treat us like this. No. Luka, if you're listening, I hope you are. Hope you're well.
Yes.
But also, what's your problem? Like, say it to my face.
Grow up, Luka.
Yeah,
grow up.
Grow up. Yeah, be the bigger man. But it would be, it's. I've had it with Luka Modric. I've had it with if anybody's seen my save, the best striker I've ever seen, Lipasiu. I put a bid in for him at Ajax. I put a bid in for him when I was at Chelsea. It was accepted. I offered him 120, 130 grand a week. He turned me down to go to Ajax, where he was on 10 grand. Like that doesn't happen. Like no. if anybody who's watching or listening can name me a transfer where a player has been offered an absolute fortune by a high reputation club that are desperate for them, and they've turned them down to go to a different lower reputation club for a fraction of the wage. Like, if it has happened, incredible, kudos to that player. But at the same time, I don't think it has. There's no circumstances I can think of where that's happened. You know, Robinho thought he was signing for Chelsea. Then he found out he was going to Man City and went, but you know what? They're paying me an absolute fortune. I'll do it. It's fine. You know, he didn't turn around to go, actually, you know what? Fulham. That's where I want to go. That's a football club. let me go there. I'm desperate.
Who's got the phone number of Charlton Athletic? That is my team.
I want to play with an aging Scott Parker. Okay, that's all Robinho ever really wanted to do. He was desperate because Scott Parker looked like a fighter pilot, and I love that. Absolutely love that. If you saw Scott Parker towards the tail end of his career, like getting out of a Spitfire, you'd just go, "Yeah, that works." Of course he is. How else is
how he gets the training?
Yeah,
exactly. Look at his attributes. He's got 18 concentration, 20 determination, 20 fighting the Red Baron. He's incredible. What a player. What a man. But yeah, a little bit more realism in that sense. And I also massively agree with you on the dynamic player valuations. I think that's something that, you know, especially over the course of a transfer deadline day, player that wants to leave the club, you should see it dropping by, you know, £2-3 million every few hours in some circumstances, especially the higher value players like a Jadon Sancho, for example. You know, who I'm a Jadon Sancho fan. I really like Jadon Sancho. But if you look at his actual situation in reality, if United properly wanted shot of him and that was replicated in the game, at the start of transfer deadline day, he's worth £60 million. By midday, he's worth 55. By 9 o'clock at night, he's worth 45. You should see, like, if they are desperate to get rid and he's desperate to leave, that valuation should incrementally drop. I love the idea of a dynamic player valuation, but again, it's got to be comparatively realistic, hasn't it? I mean, you know, we've talked about the valuations of players transfer deadline day wise. I'm looking now at my old Dortmund team. Pep Guardiola took over Dortmund in my save after I left, just for context. Big shoes to fill, Pep, and he's currently 4th in the Bundesliga. Fraud. I'm looking at some of the players, and I'm looking at their valuations, and bearing in mind, this is a team that, in fairness, has won 2 back-to-back Champions Leagues. They are Bundesliga champions for the first time in 20 seasons. I'm looking at the valuation of some of the players that I signed in. So I bought a Brazilian striker called Celso Young. I bought him midway through my first season. He's good. He's not phenomenally good, but he's good. He's got right attributes in the right places in a lot of places. When I left the club, he was worth £75 million, and that was, where are we now? So I'm in November now, and I've been out of the game for about 6 months before I got the Porto job. No, it wasn't even that long. So we're technically the same season. So worth about £70 to £75 million when I left at the end of last season. I'm now on the 1st of November in my save. And because Pep Guardiola is managing the club, a striker that was worth £70 million 3 or 4 months ago, who has scored 8 goals in 14 games this season, is now worth 184. Because Pep Guardiola's there. They've looked at his valuation and they've just stuck a 1 in front of it. He's not signed a new deal. He's just now worth £110 million more than he was when I was there. And he's not massively improved anywhere. It's not like suddenly like his attributes have absolutely skyrocketed. He's still very much the same player that I left there. But for whatever reason now, he's valued at £184 million. And I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's a very, very confusing one. So in terms, I think, you know, dynamic player values, absolutely, especially, you know, I think they, you know, as they start to improve and they start to, you know, if they've hit a purple patch in November, December time, that valuation should start to go up a little bit as you approach the next transfer deadline day and the transfer window. But there's no reason for a player's valuation to improve by £110 million over the space of 3 or 4 months when arguably, A, he's playing worse, The team are performing worse in the league. It's just that they have a significantly higher reputation manager in charge of the club. So that doesn't make any sense to me. So again, one of those things. Love to see it implemented, but it's got to be implemented correctly, I think is the safest way to describe that one.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but that kind of throws my immersion a little bit when it's excessively high. So I've seen Ødegaard after one season being worth £273 million. There's no way. These transfers don't really happen that often, and when they do, it's the kind of 70 to 110 is the kind of like, that's a big price for a player. Yeah. That's a good transfer, and it tends to be the younger player of just before their peak kind of hits that time. Ødegaard is at his peak right now. 1 year on, he's still at his peak. 273 million. You're telling me that if Real Madrid come in with a £125 million bid, Arsenal don't bite their hand off for it? Like,
yeah,
there's a little bit of that where the prices are just too inflated for me. And then I'm like, oh, well, that's not realistic. And I want my game to feel realistic. Fair enough. You go 20 years on and there's a few more £200 million players. I get that. The Saudi League get involved even more. Maybe the Saudi League grows reputation throughout. And I think it does kind of rely on the Saudi League or leagues like that, or how well you do. If your team does really well, you can lift your league up and bring more money in and things like that, and sponsorship deals increase. There's probably a ceiling for that. I don't really know where the ceiling is, but I think maybe then you start to see the more £200 million. But it's such a rare deal to go over 150.
Yeah,
just to have it in their value just seems silly.
I used to think that you've mentioned it there. I used to think that, especially with FM24, I thought it was a Saudi League tax, because I think these player valuations skyrocket because suddenly there are 10 clubs in a it's a league that you can't manage in, but there are 10 clubs that have or potentially have the financial capacity to make these moves for players. But then I thought about it a little bit more. And although, yes, it is very, very commonplace to see a lot of the bigger name players go to the Saudi League. I think, it's quite commonplace. FM24, especially the likes of your Kevin De Bruyne's, your Virgil van Dijk's, your Mo Salah's, Messi at the start of the game, especially very, very commonplace for them to end up in Saudi Arabia after a few seasons. But you actually break that down, it's very rare a fee is paid for them. They go on the end of their contract, off they go. That's generally speaking the move. I think the highest value player I've sold to a Saudi club this year was Bruno Fernandes in the network game, and he went for £92 million. And they paid him like £1.2 million a week, which you'd expect anyway, because that's how the wage structure works. I've seen Diogo Dalot out there on like 850 grand a week, and okay, live your life, Diogo. But it's very, very rare that you see those huge transfer fees paid. I think I've seen one in my save this year that's over the £200 million mark. And I think I talked about it. That was one of my midfielders from Dortmund, who was there, who had won me the Champions League last season, and then Pep sold him to Barcelona straight away. He's the first one I've seen where they've had that astronomical transfer fee paid for them. But I think, part of me thinks that, like I say, those numbers, it's there to counteract for the fact that there are suddenly clubs that have the capacity to pay these astronomical fees for players. But again, it's unlikely that you're going to see more than one of those a season, if even that. I can't think of a single one I've seen where a player has gone to Saudi Arabia this year on my save where they've actually paid that huge fee. Wage wise, oh, absolutely, they're making bank, but they're not coming in and looking at Ødegaard and saying, okay, right, we're going to give you £205 million for him. And I was like, oh, we already wanted 220. It's not really happening. But it maybe that's just something that's happening behind that the game has to take into account for. Like, you're seeing these astronomical fees because there is now a higher percentage chance of those players potentially having those fees paid for them. I'm phrasing that as a question. I don't know. SI, tell us. Please tell us. Well, because I think
I was going to say, I mean, I've just loaded up on the med just to kind of see what, like, again, those kind of prices of people going. The most there is each year in terms of a fee, nothing seems to be higher than like 140 million most. So having players valued at 200k, even if I go right back to the beginning of things, the beginning of time, that first year, 44.5 million to a Saudi club as well. So the players being valued over 200 million seems kind of crazy because it doesn't happen. I can imagine, like, as you say, as things sort of evolve, maybe there is a bit more, a bit more dynamic within the valuing, but it's hard to see why certain players are worth so much.
Yeah. And like Steak said, it's a generational thing, isn't it? There are going to be certain players from every generation of footballers that are going to be, clearly the best of that generation.
Yeah.
And they are going to command higher fees at some point in their career. But again, that's your, we've seen it with players like, Mbappe and Neymar, for example, at the time, arguably the best of their generations, making those like ridiculous money moves to oil money clubs. But that shouldn't affect how much, Michel Bastos is worth. There you go. That's a player from 25 years ago. Oh God, think of a winger. Think of a Brazilian winger. You've got Michel Bastos. Nobody saw Michel Bastos coming out there. Yeah. That shouldn't affect how much Felipe Anderson is valued at. That doesn't automatically. Well, he's a Brazilian winger has just sold for 170 million pounds. Well, clearly, Felipe Anderson, who is very, very fast and is quite good at dribbling, is now worth 170. It shouldn't have that much of a knock-on effect on other players that quickly. So, but again, the diamonism, it's got the potential there, and this is the thing. That's one of the big takeaways for this conversation is that everything that we're talking about, these aren't things that we're saying would be the easiest thing in the world just to automatically implement into Football Manager, but the potential is there for something similar, because like I say, the crux of this, what we want to do is take a feature in the game like a transfer deadline day and make it as exciting as possible. There have been times in the past, and again, I think it's Stakey, you mentioned the immersion side of things, which is again a huge key feature for most Football Manager players. If we look at this from the context of, Football Manager compared to real life now, for example, there are times where, at the end of a transfer deadline day, in reality, I will sit and I'll go through as many transfers as I can. And I'll go, oh, I didn't realize that they'd signed him. Or, oh, I didn't even realize he wanted to leave that club. Oh, this is really interesting. This is really exciting. Then you start thinking about it from a Football Manager point of view. You go, oh, this would be a fun save because suddenly this team looks really, really interesting. Like you spend the time going through it in reality, or if you really, really get deep into your football, you might enjoy doing it. I think I do it because I support a club, of perennial underachievers. So I'm more interested in other clubs because, that might be exciting. My club is going to be comparatively boring, or I say boring, not very good all season, and that's fine. But then you invest in other clubs, you invest in their transfer windows. Like, oh, I tell you what, Brentford have had a really good window. Or I tell you what, Palace have done really, really well. Palace have picked some really interesting players. Again, on Football Manager, it's not the kind of thing that post deadline day, I don't look at other teams. I don't look at other leagues and go, oh, that's a really interesting move. And I think, again, it goes back to the way I address a transfer window in general. I try and pick up my key targets. Obviously, you'll know where they go if they don't join you. But apart from that, I'm not really that invested in what's going on in other clubs. And I think if transfer deadline day had a little bit more of that about it, if you look and you go, oh, I'll tell you what, there's a 3-way bidding war going on at the moment for Nathan Ake. I really want to know how this turns out. Like you it's taking advantage of features or bits and pieces of Football Manager that people might not necessarily invest as much time in. And the more buttons people click on when it comes to Football Manager, the more it broadens your experience with the game. And to mine, in my opinion, the more enjoyment people are going to get out of Football Manager because they're realizing there are more and more and more things there. So it can only be a good thing. That would be something that, again, I'd really like to see that get lent into in terms of FM25. It's just the new features are coming, new match engines. That's all incredibly exciting, but it's making sure that the base layer of Football Manager is still Football Manager. It's that immersion. It's that creating your own world. It's creating your own footballing reality that's going to make you want to go back, load up that game, get involved, and really, really start. I love blurring the lines of reality when it comes to FM. I love looking at a player in real life and then thinking, I didn't think they played for Nottingham Forest. I thought they played for Benfica. And then you realise you're getting confused because they play for Benfica in your Football Manager save. And as it turns out, you don't hate them as much as you hate them in... Oh, no, he's fine. Actually, no. The real version of him, lovely, lovely, wonderful man. The Benfica version of him, can't stand him. Terrible, terrible man. And it's okay. It's okay to hold those kind of biases towards virtual players, but definitely not the real ones.
Luka.
it's Luka Modric.
every time I see that man holding a Ballon d'Or or just anywhere close to it, I'm like, did Modric win? Did he? Now I've said that. Did Modric win a Ballon d'Or?
He did, yes.
Yeah, he did. There you go. I'm not making that up.
Split the Ronaldo Messi interchange, and then there's just one Modric, and then Messi.
There we go. That was it. I thought I'd made that up, and I like to think that he did it in hindsight to spite us.
Definitely.
Is
so
revenge?
Luka.
Yeah, typical Modric.
Typical Luka.
Typical Modric. There you go. That's the move. Right after this, we're all going to start FM saves, sign Luka Modric, and then just not play him in the reserves with you. There you go. You retire in shame, Luka. How dare you? How dare you? Or we try and sign on transfer deadline day and actually take part and see how it goes. Imagine that. Imagine that. Oh, that was lovely. I think in terms of a transfer deadline day, do you think we've hit the key points here, fellas? Do you think we've? Is there anybody who is itching to say more? Because I know you guys came prepared today.
I mean, in terms, because one thing I was, like you said a second ago, in terms of like just sort of clicking buttons, I was just sort of just in terms of like, okay, well, once you're actually in deadline day, is there anything that's actually there that's of benefit? And it's got to be, and in the FM's deadline day defense, it's got important stuff in there. You've got agent offers, players that you've got that are attracting interest. Any of your squad that are running out of contract, or any of your listed players, all that sort of stuff. Recent activity is kind of, I suppose, an interesting one if you're trying to create that bit of tension where if you're looking at a centre back and then all of a sudden it shows up on there as Bayer Leverkusen have put a bid in for that player that you want, you might want to act quick here. There is a page that displays these things, but there's no, it just comes across as just a bunch of lists and just things. There's no like you say, there's no like interaction from the players that are listed, transfer listed, or sort of going, like, look, you haven't played me at all this season. You need to lower my price because I want to leave and you're clearly not going to use me. And it's like, you know what, you're absolutely right. And you can negotiate things, but aesthetically, there's a lot of, it's a lot of stuff to take in as well in that amount of time. Like you'll see like the agent offers when you're involved in one, it's just endless, like, oh, this player's testing the waters, this person wants to leave, this person, or they're interested in doing something, but there's no way of like filtering it. There's no way of putting it through a system, because it, like, you could get like, oh, look at all these right backs that want to leave, and be like, I don't play with right backs, why are you even telling me this? Or one of the biggest bugbears is when you're in somewhere like the Serie A, where you've got your non-EU slots. And you've got all of your non-EU slots. They are filled. You've used all 3 of them. So, of course, the next 50 scout reports that come through are for Argentinians, Brazilians. Look at these Colombian wonder kids. They're great. It's like, yeah, thanks. We can't sign them. Stop bringing them to me, please. It's like, I just don't have the space. So there needs to be a little bit more intelligence, I think, within the game on some of those things. And yeah, and just some way of kind of just getting rid of the chaff. And so you can go, right, these are the things that matter right now. These are things that you should actually be paying attention to to benefit your save, to benefit your team. And again, like I say, to sort of just get a bit more realism. I can't imagine that, there may be, I have no idea, but an agent is sitting there and types out an email going, I'd like to sell my player, send all, go, and just it should be like a player that's interested. Be like, oh well, you scouted him a while ago, he heard that you were looking at him, he's interested, or he actually really likes the look of your club, like a player approaching you instead of you approaching a player or their agent, I suppose, and it actually being like he's a fan of how your club's playing, he thinks he could be of benefit to you, and his club want to get rid of him. There is a feature where you're trying to sell a player and it says, oh, there's no interest, and you have to persuade them to find a new club. Goes nowhere every single time. I'd like to see in both directions there being something where you go and find, go try and find a new club, and they might be like, oh, they've actually reached out to a handful of teams, and yes, they're offering less than what you want, but they will get rid of the player. And in the same sense, you should have like my club want to get rid of me, but no one's interested. Do you want to sign me? Because I could be an all right, rotation player for you. And you might go, actually, I hadn't even scouted you. You actually look decent. Let's talk. Little things like that. So yeah, less chaff, more benefit.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you there. And most of these things that we've mentioned are, it's not that FM doesn't have them at all. It's that it's got something there, and it just, like you say, it just ends up with lists that don't really push deadline day in a way that makes it super fun. And I think that's just what we want. We just want a little bit more fun about deadline day. And building on the kind of more to deadline day and the fact that it just ends up looking like lists. I think when it comes to FM25, we're going to have a new engine. We're going to have some more interesting things on the screen, I would imagine. Perhaps pushing towards the more bright, colourful transfer deadline day is something that they could do to kind of show off the engine. I'm looking at EAFC's career mode, for example. When you go through deadline day, you get these like flashing up images of, let's say, Manuel Akanji in an AC Milan kit going, holding the badge, and like a freeze frame photo like you would get as an announcement on Twitter of the player signing. Little things like that, just to add a little bit more flair, could be quite interesting. I know they're adding Fabrizio Romano to the game with a here we go kind of thing. Not so sure I'm super keen on that, because I don't know, that's a little bit silly and gimmicky. But perhaps they can show off FM25's engine in that way next year by adding a few of these social media features, or Harry Redknapp rolling his window down and being like, well, what are we doing today on the deadline day, and twitching all over the place. That kind of thing would be absolutely fantastic and hilarious. But it just needs more flair. And I think that's the kind of point that we're all trying to get across, is that there's something there on Football Manager. We just want more.
Absolutely. Give us, I want an AI generated image of Peter Odemwinge's Range Rover outside Loftus Road. Like that's what we want.
Season.
Every single season. I want that. That's just, it's going in my background. I'm getting.
But you say that. You say that would be an interest. If a player's personality is mercenary or fickle, and they're trying to get the move, something like that would jazz up deadline day. If you got an email come through going, "Oh, your 35 million valued centre midfielder found out that QPR are interested in him, and he's talking to the club. He's trying to make the move happen already. You should deal with this."
He's gone AWOL. For the day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'd be great. I'd be very, very happy with that. I mean, it's hilarious when it happens to somebody else, but when it happens to you, be furious. But again, it's just that and that again, that ties back into leaning into player characteristics, and that's one of the things that people shouldn't look at more when they're signing a player, is that personality type. If you're signing somebody that's a bit of a mercenary, these are the kind of things that you have to watch out for. These are the kind of things that could happen over the course of their career. I'm shocked at this player who has moved clubs every single 18 months his entire career, Suddenly, we're in transfer deadline day in January, and he's been spotted in Norwich. I'm beggars belief. What are the chances?
Thought I was the one.
I thought we had
He loved
something.
me.
Yeah, I thought he loved me. Exactly. Then you'd cry on stream for half an hour, and everyone laughs at you. Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. But I think it's that the razzle dazzle. I think there is the potential for it, and I think you've hit on like EAFC's career mode. One of the only things that I think it does very well is the presentation of things like, for example, transfer deadline day. Obviously, in terms of, and without wanting to get back into that debate over graphics and visual present, it's FM isn't going to have the capacity to render the same kind of images that EAFC does, but they've included social media now on FM, which that's a feature that I think could really lean into. I mean, hey, maybe that's another thing, especially when it gets close to transfer deadline day. Maybe that's something that influences a player's decision. It's like, I'll tell you what, social media, the fans are going to love you. Look at social media. Look at this fictional Twitter feed that we have. Bob from Scunthorpe is delighted about the concept of you signing for the club. Like, don't you want to make Bob happy? Don't you want to make Bob happy? And they're like, oh, I do. I didn't realize I did, but I do. God, Bob's happiness is now paramount to me. Like, these are the kind of little things, that influence the players, and that get, and then the next step of the social media is to, start rendering those images, start getting the players there, with the kits, whatever it may be, just to make it feel a little bit more real, a bit more immersive, a bit more fun. And then that could really be something that, again, it's a selling point, isn't it? It makes it more interesting for the people who are playing the game, which can only be a good thing. But I also completely agree with you. No, here we goes. Far too gimmicky. Far too gimmicky. Not for me. Although I saw somebody the other day do a here we skedaddle, and that made me laugh. I was like, okay, Twitter, you get it. You get it.
You win again.
You've done it all. There you go. Look, we're going to sit here. We'll be here in a few months' time when FM25 launches. We'll be sat here, and I think that's actually this is our long-term homework. Jeb and Callum, this is your long-term homework as well, and I'm going to write this down to remind myself. FM25, after it releases, be it on the beta, be it the full release, whatever it may be, whatever you want to do, we all have to do the first full transfer deadline day in our saves, regardless of what it is, regardless of whether something we're all doing together, something we're doing separately, doesn't matter. FM25, we all have to sit and do the first full transfer deadline day and try and take advantage of as many of the different options and things that it gives us. And we'll meet back in a few months and we'll compare notes and we'll see what we all think. There you go. See, homework. That's what people love about podcasts. Homework. People are dead into it. Lovely. Look, I think we've all talked briefly. One of the things that came up there, obviously, we've all realised is, we've all been scorned by Luka Modric, because this year we've all had a little dip into Mad Scientist retro database, and some of us are, instead of dipping in, are fully immersed in Mad Scientist retro database at the moment. Dee, we've kind of alluded to it earlier in the pod and last week as well. You're getting some retro West Bromwich Albion on at the moment. How's West Brom in the past going for you right now?
The past has gone well. So to give it a bit of context, this is the save that I did based around that charity stream back in April, where I'd created a West Brom squad. I'd only really improved in minor areas, but I'd improved well. And we absolutely destroyed the championship. 125 points, one loss in the league all year, made it to the semi-finals of both domestic cups. And it was like, okay, I want to get back into here. So we did. And had our first year in the Premier League, and it had mixed results, let's say. It started, if anybody was there for the start of the season back in the Prem, so this would be 08-09, it was humbling. Let's call it humbling. Couldn't win at home at all, couldn't win on the road at all either, but the road felt worse because our first two away fixtures, Man United, Chelsea, and collectively we lost 11-1 across both fixtures. Yeah, the Man United game was 7-1 to them in the first. I'm looking at it now, and it's like, oh god, yes. So now it's like flashbacks. We were 4-0 down at half time, and a young Juan Cuadrado, who we picked up, had managed to pick him get a red card, and then start of the second half, literally within 10 minutes of that starting, Paul Robinson gets sent off. So no wing backs immediately, and we lose 7-1 with a 9-man team. So I had a bit of a breakdown on stream, as one would, tactically, and we created kind of a 3-1-4-2. So a little, you actually mentioned it. It's kind of similar to what you were doing at Ajax, but with more of a flat line, more of a mid block, just to kind of be like, look, let's just stop losing, please. Let's just try and hold things on and just see what happens. Why not? Let's just have a bit of fun. My wing backs are doing terribly. Let's bin them off. And form started turning round. We'd been knocked out of the League Cup by Portsmouth. Well done them. But league results were really starting to pick up, and we managed to grit a really, really good bit of momentum. Like February down to May, we were out of all competitions bar the league, so that's all we had to focus on. And we had a really, really good run towards the end, and we managed to finish in 7th. First time of asking. This is obviously in an alternative past where the likes of Luis Suarez are up front for us, and Daniel Sturridge and Nicholas Bentner, we've got Kasper Schmeichel in goal, and various other wonderful players are joining us. Managed to get a young Angel Di Maria on loan, which was just what a treat. But we managed to finish 7th, which typically in the league means you get a Conference League spot, or the equivalent of in this database. But thankfully, in the FA Cup, it was a final between Tottenham and Arsenal, who had both already got Champions League football. So regardless of the outcome, the 7th place team got a Europa League slot, which was us. So all of a sudden, we'd gone from being, a team that were like, okay, Conference League. I like the idea of us being in the Conference League. I think that's about right for a team of our level. We could probably walk it and have a really nice time, win a trophy, everyone's happy. Now we're in the Europa League. It's like, the teams are a little bit better in this, and they scare me, as they should, because obviously you finish 7th, you get European football, but the issue that you have then is because you've kind of done promotion 7th, a lot of people go, you're still not big enough a club for us to want to join. And so many, again, we're talking about transfers, like the amount of transfers that I would go to and be like, I want to sign you. And they go, yeah, he doesn't want to join you under any circumstances. You need to improve your standing in the Premier League. And it's like, but we're playing in Europe. Like, work with me. Heartbreaking moments of, Ben Foster every single time going, I will never play for West Brom. And it's like, you've changed. You've changed, man. Ben. Heartbreak. Absolute heartbreak. But then, eventually you manage to convince a few lads to join you. You get, you manage to sign Johnny Evans and Gerard Piqué because of, that makes sense. Marco Reus joined you because standard FM nonsense. We're about halfway through the first season now. We got knocked out of the League Cup by Man United. We're still in the FA Cup, UEFA Cup. We have made it to the knockout playoffs, and we're currently sat in 8th. There's a chance maybe we push for European football again, but I think the attention is kind of mainly on the UEFA Cup and maybe trying to do something in Europe. And it's obviously it's had its challenges, but it's been so much fun just diving into this. And again, you see wonderful moments on deadline day. I would again message Stakey about this because Portsmouth had put in a bid for Keylor Navas in this universe, who's quite good. He's quite good, and I think we'd scouted him on the stream beforehand, and I was like, oh yeah, he looks good, but we don't need him, so I'm not going to sign him. But then as soon as Portsmouth had a bid rejected, I think it was like 700-800k, they rejected it. It was kind of like, well, I've got a little bit more money than that. I think I could probably sign him, sell Asmir Begovic, get 17 million, bring in Keylor Navas, and while we're at it, Willian, because he exists as well.
Sure.
Yeah, so just hijacking moves. So bring that in more, FM. Bring that in where it goes, oh, this player's joining a team that are currently above you in the league. Portsmouth are doing very well, Stakey. You're in 6th.
Come on.
You're in 6th, mate. Absolutely smashing it. Let me actually, and purely for the sake of it. Oh,
no, it's okay.
We won't talk about Sheffield. Unless I can tell you where they are. You won't be pleased.
I don't think they're going to be in the same league they started the save in, are they?
Well, they are in the Championship.
Oh, okay. That is a win by my standards. Yeah. I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah. They're doing fine. They are.
Have they consistently been in the Championship, or have they dipped out and then popped back up?
No, the entirety of the universe they have been in the Championship, which is very nice.
That's something.
They've got Nigel Pearson in charge, as you would expect,
of course.
And they are 23rd.
Yeah, sounds about. Yeah, that's not bottom though. Not bottom.
Not bottom. That'll be Swansea.
Those. We absolutely take those. I looked at Sheffield Wednesday when the database came out, because I was like, I need maybe I'll do a retro Sheffield Wednesday, and it could be fun. It's arguably one of the worst Sheffield Wednesday squads in living memory for me.
What do you mean? You've got the likes of Lee Grant and Tommy Spur.
Yeah, stinks. Honestly, one of the worst Sheffield Wednesday squads in my lifetime. And I was like, I just can't, because part of the joy of a retro save is, as you say, the fact that you've got Angel Di Maria just turned up at the Hawthorns.
Yeah,
of course you have. Of course you bloody have. It's finding those young up and comers, those upstarts, those whippersnappers from around then, and going, you know what? I have the inside track on your career. I've got Biff's Sporting Almanac from Back to the Future. I know you're going to be quite good at football, so I'm going to sign you. That's always loads of fun. But you just can't do it at Sheffield Wednesday. You physically got. They don't have the draw. They don't have the finances. There's nothing about that club that makes players want to go and sign for them. So it almost defeats the purpose of doing one of Mad's retro database saves, because you can't. The part of the fun is, like you say, Marco Reus. You know, it's part of the appeal. It's part of the joy of those saves. You just can't do it. You just physically don't have the capacity to do it. So you've still got to almost just replicate it and just slum it in the Championship for as many years as you can until you start to. Fingers crossed, you pray for a takeover. That's the key to a successful Sheffield Wednesday save and Football Manager over the last 4 or 5 iterations of the game. Cross your fingers and hope that Defon Chancery just decides to sell the club to somebody who's sane, and then you might be okay. But unless he's going to do that, you're going to struggle enormously. And again, now I'm talking about it out loud. Again, I was thinking about maybe doing Sheffield Wednesday next year on FM25 for a bit, but now I'm saying it out loud.
No, you've talked yourself out of it.
Completely taught myself out. It's miserable is what it is, lads. It's a miserable existence.
Well, hopefully the next Mad database will appeal to you, because he's doing 94-95 as his next one.
Great year.
So there we go. You know, there might be some gold in them there.
I'm already looking at the squad. I'm already
I've just done the same thing. Des Walker. There you go. Andy Pearce, Chris Bart Williams. These are names, aren't they?
The Bartman. I see the Chris Bart Williams. Now we're talking. Chris Bart Williams is one of my all-time favorites. See, Dan Petrescu.
Just about to say.
Dan Petrescu.
Man that's does every draw, every FA Cup for me.
Chris Waddle was still there. You know, it's not prime Chris Waddle, but I think it's Chris Waddle's last season at the Wednesday.
Oh,
obviously Trevor Francis, player manager.
I wasn't born, so just thought I'd put that one in there just to make you feel good.
Thanks, Stakey. Appreciate that, mate. Appreciate that. Obviously, a front line, look, a strike partnership of Mark Bright and David Hurst. I mean, what's not to like? A young Guy Whittingham, Graham Hyde.
Oh, Guy Whittingham, Portsmouth's all-time league top goal scorer.
Yeah,
in one season. 50
in one season,
50 goals in one season. Ridiculous number.
Yeah.
Beautiful
Ooh.
man.
Where did he learn
Not
it?
a good manager though. Not a good manager.
No. Oh, this is the season. This is the season for me. Obviously, Carlton Palmer's not there, so we'd have to rectify that very quickly.
You've got to solve that.
Where was Carlton back this year? Again? Oh, see, this is the podcast now. We're doing a deep dive. Oh no, he just left. He'd just gone to Leeds. So okay, we're not going to fix that. He's already besmirched me. But see, there you go. See, there you go. Next year, Retro Sheffield Wednesday's back, boys. There you go. Fantastic. See, that's cheered me up no end. Oh, what a relief.
Whereas to be fair, for me, Retro, this is the year for Portsmouth. Like this year and maybe the following year after we'd won the FA Cup and played AC Milan in Europe. Like that was like the best Portsmouth squad I've ever seen, certainly in my very short lifetime, you know. So yeah, watching Han play the other day, I couldn't not pick up the game as well and start having a look round, and getting Hulk for 600k to sign for Portsmouth was quite fun. And then obviously taking out my Luka Modric hate and loaning to buy, with an option to buy, Ivan Rakitic to become the best Croatian player of all time. That's what's going to happen now. I'm going to go on and make sure that Ivan Rakitic is the best player ever and Modric is forgotten.
A footnote in the annals of history. That's going to be Luka Modric.
Exactly. Luka Modric.
Yes. There you go. And I think that's this week's episode title sorted as well, which is perfect.
Oh God, double whammy.
I know. Firing on all cylinders. Look, Dee, I'm very excited. I've got a good feeling about this Albion team. I've got a good feeling. I think you're going to accomplish great things. And
I really hope we do.
It's all on you. It's all on you. Yeah. So the future's in your
often.
hands. Future is in your hands.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Fellas, I don't know about the two of you, but that very much feels like a podcast to me.
Does indeed.
Yeah, very pod feeling.
Felt quite poddy, didn't it? Felt quite poddy. Before we go, though, before we wrap up, Steakity Bakety, you made your glorious return to Twitch this week with Santa Clara. If that's the kind of thing that you think you might want to do again in the future, where can the people find you doing that and all of the other wonderful content that you make online?
Yes, definitely. We'll be coming back to streaming much more regularly now. I'm back in the groove and enjoying it. And the Santa Clara save went very well this week. So therefore, I'm back into it as well. I'd forgotten about it a little bit. And then I dabbled in some transfers, played some games, did very well, and thought, you know what, this is what I want to be doing. And of course, the most important thing was chatting to everyone as well. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you, anyone that turned up this week. If you do want to join me, the_steak_bake is my Twitch name, and then I'm just at the steak bake on everything else. So that's how you can find me.
Wonderful. Please make sure you are doing all of those things. Dee, what about you, my friend? People would like to watch you managing a retro West Bromwich Albion team and just smashing up Europe. Where can they find you doing that?
Yeah, if people want to come hang out in the past with me, they can do so on twitch.tv/dboyplays. That's DEEBOI plays.
Super duper. I'd encourage everybody to do all of those things.
What about you, Rich? If people want to hang out with you?
People want to hang out with me, they can do so at twitch.tv/Jebaru or twitch.tv/YCallum. Both are good. I'd recommend all of those things. And also twitch.tv/RichOwensFM. Watch me managing Porto surprisingly well and hopefully sticking it to Benfica, the big stiff idiots. They turned me down and I've never gotten over it. And nor shall I. Come and spend some time with any of us, all of us. Why not? Live your best life. Again, I think we maybe mentioned this at the end of last week. There is also the inevitable return of the FMT network game as well. I'm just going to put that out there. Keep an eye on social media for that. When that happens, that'll be lovely. Oh, and before we go as well, quick congratulations to our former co-host and wonderful friend Kev.
Yes.
Congratulations to Kev, because Kev's had an absolute stunner over the past week. As we all know, Kev's history of stream saves over the last couple of FMs have not always gone his way, especially last year due to circumstances completely beyond his control, which was enormously unfair. This week, our boy Kev successfully completed his rolling in the aisle save. So
Yes,
congratulations, Kev. Very proud of you, mate. It's one of the highlights of the week for me, hearing that Kev had pulled that one off. So congratulations to you, buddy. He's now doing Retro Valencia because he's got unfinished business with them in the past and the present. So he's just rectifying that. So more power to Kev. Hope it goes brilliantly. There you go. We've done the pleasantries, done all the things. We've done a podcast that I think quite successfully wraps up another episode of Football Manager Therapy. Thank you very much for listening, for watching, however you are consuming this podcast. We appreciate you enormously, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Love you lots. Bye-bye.